everybody. All right, I'm kind of off to the side today because I've got such a big book that it takes up the whole video. It's called Orlando, the Marmalade Cat. And this one is a pretty old-fashioned story with old-fashioned drawings, and it's such a good one. I used to read this all the time when I was a little girl. But marmalade, you might have eaten marmalade once before, maybe on toast. It's kind of like jelly, and it's orange. So it's talking about the color of Orlando's fur. He's an orange cat, and they're going to go on a trip. Let's see what Orlando, the Marmalade Cat, is going to do. Orlando and his kittens had all been to sicky with bad colds. Sea breezes blow away sneezes, Orlando said slyly. Their master took the hint, said goodbye to Grace, Orlando's wife, who preferred to stay at home and put up her feet. He packed the kittens in his pocket, Orlando in a basket, and took them to New Haven for a holiday by the sea. In the train, Orlando was in his basket, was put in a guard's van. During the journey, Orlando, full of curiosity, squeezed out of his basket to explore, and when the train arrived, he jumped out to look for his family, but he couldn't find them on the platform. So he ran along to the quay to see if they were there. So he's a very curious cat. On the quay, he found all sorts of lovely things. A fish the fish smacks had left behind, and some milk that had leaked from a churn. He lapped it up, and this made him feel very cheerful. He played with a clockwork mouse that a little boy had dropped until he became sleepy. Then he looked for a quiet place for a rest. Near some luggage, he found a hot water bottle on which he had a snooze. When he woke up, he was surprised to see a snake which had traveled across the sea, hidden in a crate of bananas. He told a docker, who said, "I'll give him to my Aunt Flossie. She dotes on serpents." At that moment, a crane lowered a tiger in a cage out of the sky. "Fancy meeting you here," smiled Orlando. The tiger, who was on his way with other animals to the zoo, purred in a foreign accent. A Persian prince with his cat and all his wives had arrived by the same ship. Orlando bowed low and humbly because he knew that the smartest cats came from Persia. Still looking for his family, Orlando followed some animals who were going with their owners up a gangway and found himself on board a ship going to France. Uh-oh. Suddenly, a very loud siren was blown to show that the ship was ready to leave. Orlando stopped up his ears and shut his eyes tight. When he opened them, the sailors had taken the gangway down. The engine started, and slowly the quay, with all its houses, stations, cranes, and people waving goodbye, seemed to be sliding away. Orlando realized with dismay that he was separated from his family and was on his way to sea. "Anyway, I shall certainly lose my sneezes," sneezed Orlando. A kind sailor called Albert, fetched him a deck chair and placed it where spray from the ocean could not wet him, and where he could hear the purring of the ship's engine, which reassured him. "Are you interested in mice?" Albert asked, lending Orlando his Mickey Mouse Weekly. Look, there's Orlando with all the people. At lunchtime, Albert showed Orlando the way to the dining saloon. He read the menu carefully and asked for cold jellied soup, prawns, and an omelet surprise. The prawns' whiskers gave him trouble, for they would get mixed up with his own, but the waiter helped to pick them off. The omelet was very hot and folded round in ice cream. That was the surprise part. Albert took him back to his deck chair where he had 40 winks. He woke up later to find everyone walking about, twiddling the lenses of their field glasses and saying, "I can see land." Orlando climbed the rigging to get a better view. True enough, he could just see a long strip of coast. The steamer glided into the harbor. The French quay, with its houses, station cranes, and people waving a welcome, seemed to be sliding towards them. The porters were leaning on the rails, sleepily watching the ship come in. When the steamer was alongside the quay and the gangway had been let down, the porters suddenly woke up and rushed on board, shouting, "Porter! Porter!" They sounded like unhappy seagulls in a storm, but they were really very pleased to have some work to do. One of them seized Orlando's suitcase and as many others as he could grab, loaded himself up, and then disappeared. Wondering whether he would ever see his luggage again, Orlando followed the crowd to the customs house. There he found his porter, very much out of breath, standing beside the luggage, spread out on 2 long tables. A fussy little customs officer came along and told Orlando to open his case. "Ouch! And what may this be, pray?" he asked as something snapped his fingers. "That's my mousetrap, sir. I'm on holiday, you see," answered Orlando, "and now you've gone and lost the cheese." "Pardon, monsieur," the officer said, and trotted off to tease someone else. The porter led Orlando to the best seat he could find in the train. He was lucky. It was a corner seat by the window. Then the porter mopped his brow with his handkerchief and said, "Ooh la la," several times. Orlando gave him a tip. He would spend it on a nice cool drink, or he might even take the money home to his family. "Decent cat, that," the porter told his friends. Women were running up and down the platform selling peaches, and Orlando bought one with his last penny. In this French port, the train runs through the street for a short distance, and Orlando could see right into the shops in which people were buying their milk, fish, and mousetraps. The train passed so close to the cafes on the pavement that Orlando could almost have sipped the wine and coffee at the tables. "Strange place, this. Some of the shops sell poisons," Orlando said to himself. The guard shouted, "Paris, next stop!" "What? Paris?" said Orlando. "But I was going to New Haven!" And he jumped out of the window. Orlando found himself in front of a charming little hotel called the Hotel of the Golden Cat. And as it was getting late, he decided to stay the night. They gave him the best bedroom. There was a telephone by the bed for him to order his breakfast by in the morning, and a tall French window. The wallpaper had fat bluebirds printed on it, which reminded Orlando that he was hungry. He had a wash and a think, and then went out into the street again, wondering how to get back to New Haven without any money for his fare. It was now dark. Orlando heard gay music and laughter coming through a doorway. He went past an old lady who was adding up figures in a book, and found the sailors from the steamer sitting at little tables watching some lovely ladies dancing on a stage to the music of a jazz band. "Allo, allo," cried Albert to Orlando. Orlando felt very shy as all the ladies started calling him Minnie, 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 which is French for puss, 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 in high squeaky voices. "What is this place?" he asked his friend. "A cafe concert, my little cabbage," Albert answered, offering him a drink of milk. After a drink, his tummy was as tight as a drum, and he felt bolder. The music excited Orlando so much that he jumped on the stage and gave his world-famous imitation of a ham. And then a dromedary. He was a great success. He called for a dish of snails for himself and Albert. French people like eating cooked snails. After Orlando had well licked the last snail shell, he danced with the prettiest lady, and they span around like tops to the music. Albert passed his hat around, and people threw money into it. He gave it all to Orlando, who was extremely pleased, as he knew he could now pay for his fare back to New Haven. All this excitement so long after his bedtime made Orlando feel tired, and he decided to go back to his hotel. He bowed gracefully to the lady, patted Albert lovingly, and said, "Good night, Al." They replied with a rousing cheer and bonsoir. He woke very late the next morning and telephoned for his breakfast. When he had eaten it and had his bath, he went to the quay to take a boat back to New Haven. But he was too late. It had sailed. Orlando took a taxi to the nearest aerodrome and climbed into a plane, just leaving for England. They were soon flying above the clouds, which looked like a solid cotton wool floor beneath them. This made Orlando feel safer. Now and again he could see the sea through it, and the ship he had missed, looking as small and neat as a little toy boat. The edge of England appeared. "There's New Haven," said the pilot. Orlando quickly seized a parachute, ran along the wing, and leapt off. It opened like an umbrella, and he floated gently down. He landed on the beach beside his master, who was minding the kittens. "Really," exclaimed the master, "where have you been?" "Ooh la la," answered Orlando, fanning himself with a piece of seaweed. All the people nudged each other and whispered, "That's a very French cat." The end. What an adventure he had! My goodness. I hope you liked hearing Orlando's travel story as much as I liked reading it for you. All right, I'll be back another time with another story. Bye, y'all.